Hello and welcome to the Fuel, Run, Recover podcast, where we are now in our third season of helping everyday runners fuel better, run smarter, and recover faster so you can reach your full performance potential. I'm your host, Stephanie Natchuk, dietitian, running coach, twin mom, and fellow runner too. As the owner of Stephanie Natchuk Performance Nutrition, I've spent over a decade helping runners learn to fuel their bodies better, unlock their best running performances, and establish healthier relationships with food and exercise. This podcast is all about helping you become the very best runner you can be by teaching you the running-specific nutrition, training, and recovery strategies that you need to reach all your wildest health, fitness, and running goals. If you're ready to reconnect with your love of running, join me each week as I share my best advice, interview guest experts, and talk to everyday runners who are conquering their goals by tapping into the power of performance nutrition, with a side of some myth busting too. And if you're looking for even more tips, resources, and strategies for runners, you can find me on Instagram at Steph the Runner's Dietitian or by visiting www.stephanienatchuk.com. All right, let's dive into today's episode. Start today's episode, I just want to really quickly invite you to download my free fueling guide and strength training guides for runners. Currently available as a handy little bundle for you all in one at the link in the show notes. So just to give you more information, in this free fueling guide, you're going to find my top fueling tips for runners. As well, in there, I've put together some meal ideas and even a couple of recipes for your pre and post run fuel. We've also got some suggestions for what to fuel with during your run to make sure that you just have the best overall performance possible. If you've really been struggling to understand what to eat, when, where to start when it comes to supporting your running with better nutrition, this guide is here to help you kickstart your running journey. The other guide that I mentioned is my strength training guide for runners. We know that runners are notoriously bad at consistently getting their strength training in. So this guide includes both a PDF resource, it's got some tips, some guidelines, as well as a link to my series on YouTube where I walk you through all the exercises in this program, giving you some suggestions on proper form, how to modify if needed, how to progress things if needed. This is a really great beginner's guide to strength training for runners who want an effective but efficient full body workout that is going to support the key muscles and movements you need to run stronger and help stay injury free. So once again, both of these guides are available as a handy little bundle. So you just click on the link in the show notes, enter your email address once, and both of the free guides are going to get sent to your inbox right away. I really hope that you find these guides helpful and that they support you and your running goals in the most effective way possible. So without further ado, let's get into today's episode. All right. Hello, and welcome to today's episode of the Fuel, Run, Recover podcast. I am your host, Stephanie Natchuk, and I'm really excited to talk to you today about something new that's kind of on the scene here, social media, fitness world, just one of the trends that's kind of been popping up more and more lately, which is this concept of being a hybrid athlete. And, if you follow some different, fitness professionals, fitness influencers, kind of, some of the big popular pages, you might see that term being thrown around a little bit more and just kind of coming into contact with it a little bit more often. So today I want to break down, what does that mean? Like, what is it to be a hybrid athlete? What are the ins and outs of being a hybrid athlete? What are some of the claims or sort of the benefits that you might see in terms of becoming a hybrid athlete? How does this work for you, the runner? Does it make sense to try and be a hybrid athlete as a runner, or primarily a runner? And of course, what are some of the maybe pros and cons that we have to consider when it comes to whether or not we want to pursue being a hybrid athlete ourselves? If you're listening to this as somebody who participates in like triathlons or something, guess what? You are already a hybrid athlete, which is great. But if you come into, listening to this podcast as primarily a runner and you've spent most of your time, most of your, fitness career really just running, then this podcast is one that you certainly should give a listen to. And, if you're coming into running from a different sport background, like I did, my background, in terms of fitness was as a personal trainer. And I spent years doing pretty much just strength training and really focusing on strength training rather than doing really a lot of cardio, any cardio at all. I don't remember doing cardio way back in the day. And then sort of transition to having a greater emphasis and focus on running about 10 years ago. So, no matter where you're coming from, I think there's something to be learned here, but also, of course, some really important considerations and things that you'll want to kind of take away when it comes to setting goals as a hybrid athlete. So what does it mean? Like, what does it mean to be a hybrid athlete, right? Hybrid, combination of things, right? When something is hybrid, it's a combination of things kind of put together into one. Think like a hybrid vehicle or something like that, right? You've got your battery power and your gas engine, and they've been melded into one, or a hybrid animal. Anyway. So a hybrid athlete is someone who, trains and maybe even competes in multiple sports, right? So looking at combining strength, endurance, and maybe for some of us who are like, doing team sports or something, maybe some like sports specific skills and that sort of thing. So you imagine a runner who also plays soccer. You run marathons, you also play soccer, maybe you strength train and swim, or as I mentioned, like you're a triathlete. And so of course you're already going to be participating in multiple disciplines of sport and training in multiple different ways. And of course, the idea behind this is that there's a lot of crossover in terms of fitness benefits, performance benefits, and improvements that you see from one sport to another by working on these different aspects of fitness training in these different disciplines. And I think, if we're talking about success as a hybrid athlete, like becoming someone who calls themselves a hybrid athlete, maybe has the ability to compete, I'll say at a fairly high level, maybe not just recreationally, but like is competitive in multiple different sports and multiple different disciplines, there's a couple of things that are going to go, be really important and kind of fuel this success. Of course, number one is you're probably looking at someone or probably finding someone who does have a long history of being in sport, has been training for many, many years, or has a natural advantage, like is just one of those individuals who just really is naturally very talented, naturally, very good when it comes to sport, picking up new sports, being able to train it in different disciplines. Like it just doesn't take them as much time, either, on a weekly basis or on a lifetime basis, to build up the strength, endurance, skills that are required for really good sport performance. So maybe they've been training for decades, or maybe they're just very naturally kind of gifted when it comes to athletics, in which case just doesn't take them as long to need to train or prepare to get to that level. Whereas like, most people, they just wouldn't have enough hours in the day or kind of hours in the week to do the training required to get them to that level. The second big thing, right, and this is true whether or not you're looking at someone who does have, say, a natural advantage, natural genetic talent in this area, is going to be adequate time to train and adequate resources to train, right? Like we're talking about needing to have more time on a daily basis, on a weekly basis to actually do the training, because we're looking at wanting to do multiple disciplines and do, say multiple workouts in a week. And we're going to talk a little bit later in today's episode about what a breakdown sort of schedule could look like in regard to a hybrid training schedule, what it would require in terms of time frame. But then this is the big thing, is you also need someone who has adequate time to train, to actually put in the work into these multiple different sports or multiple different disciplines, but then also someone who has enough time for recovery. And this is recovery in the sense of like rest time in between training sessions, maybe other recovery modalities, right? Maybe this person is using foam rolling, massage, Theragun, other things to sort of speed up recovery and enhance recovery in between sessions. And then, of course, fueling, right? You're also looking at someone who is going to need to have their fueling really dialed in order for them to be able to support the additional training load, the additional volume, the additional stress for that quick turnaround time in between workouts. Because if you're training once a day, right, you've got a full 24 hours to refuel and recover before your next workout. But if you're training twice a day, now you only have, maybe 6 hours, 8 hours, something like that in between sessions, which means that you need to recover as fully as possible, as much as you possibly can in between those workouts. But then you only have maybe 12 hours between that second session of the day and the next session the next morning. So that turnaround time is faster. And so recovery and refueling and all of that stuff just becomes that much more important. So there's a few kind of things that if those are not realities for you, then, to, I will say, become a high level hybrid athlete might be a bit of a stretch. Now, I do think that there's value for every single one of us to have a diverse approach to our training, to have periodization in our training, and to be able to shift our focus to different goals throughout the year and maybe throughout the years to kind of improve and refine different aspects of our fitness to become a more well-rounded athlete. However, if we're talking about, say, competing at a specific level as a hybrid athlete, there are some specific considerations that just mean that for a lot of us, it's probably not going to be as feasible. So this sort of concept, this whole idea of being a hybrid athlete, like, is it new? It's something that we're seeing a little bit more on social media. I think it's becoming a lot of like the personal brand for some influencers and for some fitness professionals. I know that there are like, some trainers out there and stuff who are kind of marketing themselves as like hybrid athlete trainers and kind of specializing in hybrid athletics and that sort of idea. But no, I mean, really, the concept certainly isn't new. I mean, but really though, like there's very, very little in fitness anymore that's new. You can't surprise me or most of us that have been around for a little while. Like everything is just, kind of these recycled ideas that just come out with a little bit of a rebrand, especially when they sort of get picked up by someone on social media who maybe hasn't been around the industry as long and then is, sort of taking it and giving it a new name and giving it a little bit of a refresh. Maybe there are some tweaks or some small changes in regard to like the definition of some of these concepts, but at its core, plenty, if not all, even sports do encourage, recommend, or sometimes even require this cross training to take place with other methods of training, other disciplines of training in order to improve overall fitness and performance. Like there's no athlete in any sport anywhere who trains for their sport and improves their sport performance by only doing one thing, one type of workout, one way. Like even if we're talking about, oh gosh, I'm gonna have trouble coming up with an idea off the top of my head. Like even if we're talking about running, for example, right? Like even those of us who running is very straightforward, right? It's just one foot in front of the other. When you're racing, you're putting one foot in front of the other as fast as you can, right? It's pretty simple. But, we talk about adding strength training to our running routine for improved mechanics, more muscle mass, better endurance, etc. We train at different intensities, different speeds to develop different aspects of our fitness. And of course, we're still running for some of those workouts. So that wouldn't necessarily fall under the category of like hybrid athletics. But you understand what I mean is that like nobody is doing just one type of training, doing just one type of thing. So now we can kind of take a step over into this concept of being a hybrid athlete, where it wouldn't really be enough to say, okay, I'm going to train, say I'm a basketball player, And so I'm going to do different things with my training that'll ultimately funnel me towards being a better basketball player. It's more about I'm going to be a basketball player, but then I'm also going to go sign up for this half marathon, like, focusing on multiple different sports and sort of, competing in multiple different sports. Little bit of a difference here than, just simply cross training with that focus of improving performance in a specific single sport. But I think at the end of the day, like, it's still fine. And we're all still talking about pretty much the same thing. You can come at me if you want. If somebody has a problem with that and they want to argue about it, that's totally fine. I'm cool with that. We can have a fight. And you imagine, like, say you have a elite level basketball player, someone who's competing. Are they also going to be able to train to be seriously competitive at running a half marathon? Well, maybe, right? I mean, again, people who have just a natural talent for athletics and have the time and the resources to train at the level they need to train at, it wouldn't be off the table necessarily. But what are the chances that there's going to be the same person, right, who has the time and the resources and everything to dedicate to running a marathon, competing at a high level as a team sport, whether it's basketball or something else, and then maybe also is going to enter a bodybuilding competition, and like win, right? All three of these things. Like, that probably isn't going to happen. You can compete in these different things and you can participate in these different sports. But once we're talking about getting to that very high elite level is where it starts to be more important to be a little bit more sport specific and kind of pick one thing that you're focusing on. There have been a few athletes over the years, I know I'm missing the name and I just came into my mind as I'm recording here. So I kind of wish that I had looked it up beforehand. But there are some people who, at an Olympic level or at a professional level have competed in multiple sports. In Canada I believe she's retired now, but she was a speed skater and a cyclist. And so, summer versus winter Olympics, but she probably, I'm certain she did a wonderful job and had professional coaches and lots of resources. Remember, like, that's always a thing, resources and time to train as a professional to help her periodize what she was doing, right? She wasn't competing in the same or in two different sports, say on back-to-back weekends, right? She had a summer Olympic sport and a winter Olympic sport. So that's something to keep in mind, is that a lot of athletes probably do a lot of cross training to prepare for their specific sport. Now, she was someone who was just able to, compete at a extremely high level, the highest level there is really in both of those things. So anyway, it happens, but it's not going to be the story for the majority of us. The other thing to remember is that, for the people who do this, they have probably decades of training behind them, right? They have, again, probably a tremendous amount of natural talent. They have lots and lots of training behind them. So, like, if you've been an athlete your entire life, you've spent 15 to 20 years building endurance, right, as an endurance athlete, or building strength as a strength athlete. Those two things, right, to then switch gears. And as someone who already has spent 15, 20 years building a lot of muscle and has a very muscular body, to then transition to focusing on building endurance, or to be someone who is very, very good, very strong from an endurance perspective, and to then transition to focusing on building more muscle, those are things that you already have this base of fitness behind. You already have all of these years of experience. So it's easier to then just shift your focus to do something a little bit different versus being somebody who maybe in your 30s or 40s or 50s are just starting your fitness journey, and you now need to simultaneously work on multiple things at once. It's hard to do this, again, without a lot of time to train, a lot of resources, and of course, adequate rest and recovery time. So I think at this point, it probably sounds like I'm coming down pretty hard on this whole concept. I am not. I do think it's really good. I do think that, as runners, we should all strive to be more like a hybrid athlete. I just think that, when we're looking at what some people on social media are doing or are trying to do, we can get a little bit caught up in saying, okay, I want to run a marathon, and then I also want to max out my bench press. And again, if we have limited time to train or limited resources in terms of like recovery, et cetera, then that can be very challenging to give both of these goals 100% of our focus and effort, right? Now, if we are a full-time athlete or a full-time fitness professional, influencer, etc., who can easily fit in multiple workouts a day, most days of the week, again, with adequate recovery in between and fueling and everything like that, for a lot of us who have families, jobs, other obligations, we only have maybe that, 60 to 90 minutes a day max to train. That's just really, really challenging to do. So I wanted to break down a little bit, what are some of the specific promises that hybrid training makes, and what are some of the things that are sort of advertised in terms of becoming a hybrid athlete or hybrid training, and what are sort of my thoughts on how legit this might be. So the first one is improved overall fitness. Now, maybe, right? Like to say that by adding in different disciplines, different types of movement to your training, you can improve your overall fitness. I feel like that's a pretty legit claim. I feel like there's nothing really wrong with saying that. But it also does depend on your definition of fitness, right? So say you're a runner and you run marathons. And for this season, for this year, you decide you really want to focus on building strength. While doing that, you cut down your running from maybe 6 days a week to 5 days a week to make space for more strength training in your schedule. Now, let's say that 6 months into this endeavor, you get the opportunity to randomly run a marathon one day. Well, chances are, because you have not been training specifically for that marathon, you've been running less than you were before, like chances are your marathon time might be slower than what it was before you started this process. And to some people, that would be seen as a loss of fitness, right? A loss of cardiovascular fitness, right? A loss of speed. That would be potentially devastating for someone to have that happen if they weren't maybe expecting it to. But of course, you weren't focusing on that marathon. You weren't training for that marathon. You had shifted to something else for this time frame. This wasn't your shot at like a best PR performance or anything like that. So, are you less fit? Well, but you've built all this strength, right? You are stronger. You are more fit in other ways. So when we talk about like, is the person who can lift the most the fittest? Is the person who can run the furthest the fittest? Is the person who can run the fastest the fittest? Maybe it's who has the lowest resting heart rate. Maybe it's who has the best VO2 max, right? There is no single definition of fitness or single marker that we can kind of compare across the board. Like you are the most fit person and you are not. Another really good example of this is like, Olympic sprinters. Olympic sprinters are fit, right? I mean, there is like nobody can argue that Olympic sprinters are fit. But I saw an interview. It was, I don't know who did the interview, but it was just a quick thing where they had stopped a American sprinter, Gabby Thomas, I believe is her name. And they were asking her questions about her workouts. And they said to her, I think it was at a race. She was spectating at a race, like a marathon. And they asked her, like, what is your longest run? And she said she doesn't run ever more than a mile. A mile for her is her longest run, right? Now, there are many, many, many people who listen to this show. I would probably say most people who listen to this show regularly run much, much further than a mile. Now, if Gabby Thomas wanted to run, say, 5 miles, I mean, she probably could, right? Maybe, I don't know. I have no idea. But like, let's say you and her were going to see who can run further, right? You potentially could run further than she could. Does that make you more fit, right? Well, it depends, right? It depends on what we're talking about. There is no single marker of fitness. It's not about speed. It's not about endurance. It's not about strength. It's like somehow about all of these things, but no particular thing all at once. That's just my take. So can hybrid training give you improved overall fitness? Well, sure, right? It can improve more of these markers, right? Like you would say, if there was one person who could lift more than anyone else, could run further and faster, and had a higher VO2 max and had a lower resting heart rate, like if there was one person who had all of these things checked off, yeah, I mean, they would be the world's fittest person, right? I would give them that title. But for most people, they're going to have one or two areas of these things that they excel at, are doing better than a lot of other people, and other areas where they struggle. It's just, it's too hard for us realistically in our lifestyle as humans, but also just as human beings. When you're training one thing, you're often going to see a loss in another area. Like to just keep everything at absolute max peak performance, peak potential all the time. It's just not the way things work. It's not the way that our physiology works. So the next kind of claim or promise around hybrid training is improved performance in specific sports. And so, yeah, absolutely. If we're talking about a runner who adds strength training to their running schedule, their running routine, 100%, right? We have plenty of research to show that this can support better running performance, right? Improve endurance, improve mechanics, reduce risk of injury, like all kinds of things that ultimately contribute to our ability to be a better runner. So yes, absolutely. Adding some hybrid training into your routine as a runner is going to benefit your performance, right? Now, it may in the short term come at the expense of your running capabilities. Like I mentioned, the person who reduced their running volume, focused on strength training, decided to up and run a marathon, had a slower time. In that short season of switching your focus, you might take away from that running performance. When you come back to it and you build up your training for that marathon again, this is where you're going to potentially, hopefully, if all goes well, see that magic happen. And of course, we want to be thinking about, if I'm trying to improve my performance in this specific sport, do my goals coincide with improving my sport specific performance? So like, again, talking about a runner who wants to improve their running time, but say also improve their bench press time, right? They want to do the heaviest bench press they possibly can while also training for a marathon PR. Well, again, unless you have lots and lots of time to do all the running you need to train for this marathon and also do a lot of extra upper body workouts that, obviously as runners, we do want some upper body strength and there's some benefit there, but like trying to max out your bench press and focus on maxing out your bench press as a runner, like that specific exercise is probably just not going to benefit your running performance all that much, compared to say focusing on lower body strength, core strength, whole body strength building, muscle and endurance everywhere, that sort of thing. So if you have these sort of two completely opposing sports or goals in a specific sport, they ultimately can maybe start to contradict each other a little bit and sort of take away from each other a little bit. And then you might wind up frustrated because you're actually not getting anywhere with any of your goals. Whereas if you picked kind of one thing at a time, then you would actually see yourself getting closer to what you want to achieve. So rather than having something like a strength training goal that competes with your running goal and takes away from your time you're able to run, which then puts your running goals at a disadvantage, we want to make sure that if we are setting multiple goals within the same time frame, they just jive and they work well together. The next claim that we see hybrid athletics making is increased motivation. I think that this one is pretty fair. Again, sort of depending on who you are as a person and just kind of what makes you tick as a person. But like for the most part, human beings, we tend to like variety. We tend to like changing things up. We tend to get bored pretty quickly. And so if you're someone who does struggle with, say, running, setting a running goal, okay, I'm going to spend the next 6 months focusing on training for this marathon. And you find that you start a plan and you get a couple weeks, maybe a couple months into the plan, and you just sort of get really sick of running. And you're just like, you're struggling. Maybe you've done this a couple of times where you're like, okay, I'm going to sign up for this race. I'm going to be super motivated to do this race, get my plan ready, and I'm going to start. And then it's like you start to get into, the grind, the middle part of that plan where it's just the day in, day out, like, oh my God, more running, more bagels. I can't imagine eating another bowl of oatmeal as long as I live. And you then sort of start to fall off of things and kind of not love running. And then by the time the race rolls around, you actually sort of hate running until you do it again, maybe 6 months later or whatever. Maybe hybrid training is actually perfect for you because yes, you will probably spend less time running, or at least fewer days of the week running, but that actually might be great for you because it would improve over the course of a year your running consistency, right? Because you don't start, stop, start, stop, start, stop every time you're training for a race, get burnt out, hate it, quit, don't run for 6 months, and then you're starting from scratch basically all over again every single time. Instead, if for like a full 12 months, you ran 3 days a week every week for 12 months of the year, at the end of a year, you would have so much more fitness built up and you would still enjoy running versus going like all in and then quitting, all in and then quitting and losing all that fitness in the meantime. So I think in terms of motivation, there definitely can be a benefit here to someone who, does want to have some variation in their calendar, keeps them committed and avoid getting bored from doing the same things all the time. But, if you do have a specific goal in terms of wanting to achieve a certain PR time or something like that at a race, then, we also want to be careful that we're not crowding our workout schedule too much and that we don't have enough time to actually dedicate to that goal that we want to. I know there are marathon training plans out there that have you running only 3 days a week, but that's going to be more of like just maybe a finish goal and versus really being able to focus on a specific time. If you have years and years of marathoning under your belt, then, you might already have enough fitness built up that you could get ready for a race just with like some specific workouts. But most people who are running faster marathon times are running a higher volume than the rest of us. The next claim or the next sort of promise that we see being made by being a hybrid athlete is more efficient workouts. And this is, a little bit of a difference from the concept of hybrid training as like dedicated workouts to different sports, but really more of the concept of hybrid training where we're doing multiple disciplines in the same workout. So in regards to efficiency, if we're talking about option one, which is like now I have to do a separate strength workout and a separate running workout and like a separate whatever else I'm doing, dance workout, whatever else I'm doing, with this goal of becoming a well-rounded athlete. If like, of course, we're not going to be more efficient, right? We're actually spending more time training than we were before. So this is not a path, a straight line to better efficiency. But if we're talking about this hybrid training and sort of switching the definition of our concept a little bit to looking at combining multiple different disciplines within the same workout, then again, yes, perhaps there's an efficiency benefit to doing more hybrid training. And this would be, looking at like a CrossFit style workout or like an interval boot camp style class. There's lots of different gyms and programs that offer this kind of thing. I've certainly taught lots of group fitness classes and stuff that incorporate this, where you're say doing a speed interval, you're going to run on the treadmill for whatever a distance or a minute or two or whatever it might be. Then you're going to go switch gears. You're going to do some push-ups. Then you're going to do that again, or maybe you're going to do some squats, or you're going to do some core work, or, and you're kind of in that workout, you're getting your heart rate up, right? You're doing cardio. You're also doing strength at the same time. Now, of course, this is very efficient, right? You're getting both of these things checked off in one workout. But at the same time, you are getting more efficient, but you're not necessarily dedicating the time that you would need to each discipline in order to like really improve. So say again, we're back to our example of the bench press. If you are going and doing a 400-meter sprint, in between every single rep you try to do on the bench press, you are not going to lift as heavy as if you were just dedicating that workout time to working on your bench press. Like if you were resting fully in between sets, taking a couple minutes in between sets to then try and lift your heaviest again and doing that like 6 times throughout the workout, right? Just doing like 3 to 5 reps, 6 sets, couple minutes of rest in between each one. Like that's what we're talking about. We're talking about like really trying to increase the maximum amount that we can do on a single lift. If we are trying to get through this workout really fast and really like keep our heart rate up the whole time, and we're going and doing some jump squats, and then we're going to do a sprint, and then we're going to do some core work and come back to the bench press, like go ahead and try it. Like I would love for you to try this for yourself. See how much you can bench when you show up, do the workout, the first one I described, where you're taking a few minutes to rest in between. You're doing more sets, fewer reps at the heaviest weight you can lift. Or the type of workout where you are incorporating that bench press move into an interval style where you're doing lots of cardio, lots of other things at the same time. Like, yes, that might be the only upper body, specifically the only push movement that you're doing during that workout or during that part of the workout. But trust me when I say, when you are sweaty, you are out of breath, all your blood flow is in your legs, in your core, like all the other things that you're trying to balance here, you will not do your strongest bench press. Will it still be hard? Well, yeah, absolutely, right? Like, of course, it's still going to be challenging and it's great. But if our focus is, I want to max out my bench press and I want to work on getting the highest number on the bench press that I can, highest weight on the bench press that I can, that's not going to be your fast track to doing it. So again, depending on your goals and depending on what you're looking to accomplish with your training at this point in time, efficiency may not be what you're actually looking for. So efficiency is possible, but efficiency may not be what's going to get you closer to your goals. Now, if you're somebody who is, very busy schedule, you've got 30 to 45 minutes to train and you want to fit in strength and cardio, then doing an interval workout along with strength and combining the two can be a great way to get in a fairly well-rounded, efficient workout that checks off a lot of boxes. But that's just a completely different goal and a completely different scenario than the first one that I described. So you might be able to spend less time in the gym with a hybrid workout, but if you're looking at having separate goals in separate disciplines, you ultimately might be spending more time at the gym than you ever were before. The next one is improved body composition. Now, this always depends on your starting point. A lot of context is sort of needed if we're talking about improving body composition, but it's a possibility, right? Especially if you're someone who is now incorporating maybe more intensity, more strength, right? More things into your workouts that we know can improve body composition, then yeah, right? If you're coming from a place where that wasn't something you were doing a whole lot of, now you are, sure, that definitely could be a possibility. But like most fitness trends, I would not take that as a guarantee, nor would I hop on a bandwagon or go with a new fitness trend because of that promise, because it is not a guarantee for every single person. And we see this with everything that comes into play with fitness. Every trend, every new workout, every new style, everything, right? The spokespeople, whether they're official or unofficial, the spokespeople at the forefront look incredible, right? They have amazing bodies. They are strong, they are jacked, they are lean, like they look, right? I said before, there is no single measure or marker of fitness, but in a lot of people's minds, and I would say in society as a whole, a hot bod is the definition of fitness, right? Whether or not that person can do anything with that hot bod doesn't matter, right? We see a hot bod, we assume that they know what they're talking about. And if they tell us that they got that hot bod by doing this new workout style, then of course everyone jumps on it. You think about the people who model for like fitness products, right? Like they do the advertisements, the commercials, the infomercials, etc. And it gives this idea that like they look that way because they're using this machine, like at home on a daily basis. They look this way because they use a machine. That is not true, right? These people are just models. They look like that no matter what. Like they look like that when they walked into the studio that day. They've never seen this machine or done this workout before in their lives. But so we see that. And then, of course, the promise is made of improved body composition. You see this person who has that body that, you would very much like to have. And we end up sometimes doing the wrong things, the things that ultimately will not get us closer to our goal, especially if, like I said, it's very hard to commit in terms of time, recovery, etc. Like you imagine if you're a runner, you're a marathon runner, or maybe an ultra runner, and like for the last 10 or 15 years, maybe since you became a runner, all you've done is easy miles, right? Like you've just focused on building endurance. You've just done, all of your miles have been easy. You've not done speed work, etc. Adding strength training, adding some intensity, some speed sessions to your training, right? Hybridizing your training, throwing some different stuff in there probably will lead to improvements in body composition, right? along, of course, with nutrition and all of that great stuff. But if you already are doing all those different things, now we're just calling it something else, you may not see the same benefits. The next one is enhanced athletic performance. Again, possibly, probably, right? If you're diversifying the workouts and the types of training that you're doing to support a specific goal that you have, then yeah, I mean, the hopes is that anything you do as an athlete, anything you do with your training is ultimately going to get you closer to where you want to be. So I would say that, like, whether or not you incorporate the concept of hybrid training, hybrid athletics into your plan, you should always be getting closer to your fitness goals. You should always be moving in a forward direction with whatever goals you have. If you're stuck, if you're not getting anywhere, like, that's something to look at. Like, if you've been training really hard for years and years and years, you're just not seeing any changes, not seeing any improvements, like, that's not okay, right? Not every season of our lives can be a PR season, right? We all go through ebbs and flows, changes in life, higher volume, lower volume, whatever it might be. But if you've been actively working towards a specific goal for a length of time and it's just not happening for you, and it's a reasonable goal, right? Like, it's a timely goal. All the SMART goal stuff has been set, all that's ticked off, and it's just not coming together. Like, I'd want to look at that, and I would want to dissect that a little bit further and figure out what the missing link might be. So to say that, like, you get enhanced athletic performance specifically from hybrid training, I mean, yeah, but you should with training no matter what, whether it's hybrid or not. And then, of course, the last one, better health and wellness. Now, this one, I found this one a little bit funny because it was just so different than the other, kind of promises and claims around hybrid training. Better health and wellness. I mean, this is going to have a huge user dependent, user specific component to it. And this may or may not be true for you, right? Depending on your fitness journey, where you're coming from, what you're adding, what you're taking away, why you're adding or taking away those things. Like, there's just so many other things that go into better health and wellness that to say, oh, just do hybrid training and you will have better health and wellness. I don't know. Like, that to me, just, I wouldn't guarantee that. Especially because if you are spending a lot of time as an athlete comparing yourself to the people you see on social media, aspiring to a fitness lifestyle or a level of fitness that, because of the context of your life and limitations around, again, how much time you have to train, resources you have for training, for recovery, all those other things, genetics, of course, like, a lot of us will just never be Olympic athletes, right? Like, even if we quit our jobs and hired a professional coach and dedicated our lives full time, right? Like, I know that I am not going to become an Olympic athlete. I'm okay with that, right? It's, makes me a little bit sad sometimes, but whatever. If we're spending a lot of time comparing ourselves and feeling bad about ourselves because we see what other people are doing and accomplishing and achieving, that can really leave us with this sense of, like, trying to do too many different things, right? We maybe got into running and we really love running, and we are signing up for, we've signed up for a marathon, getting ready for this marathon. Then we're scrolling our social media and we see this guy who we follow because he was running a marathon. So we followed him because, you're following different running accounts. And now you see the same guy that you just saw run a marathon like last weekend has a bodybuilding competition coming up next weekend. And you're thinking to yourself, oh man, like, if he can do it, so should I. He ran a marathon and now he's doing a bodybuilding competition. Well, I should start doing a bodybuilding competition. So now I need to switch gears and try to keep marathon training because I've got this marathon coming up, but also I need to start bodybuilding. Like, no, right? And that is the problem with social media, is this comparison trap that we all fall into constantly, right? Like, we all do it. It's just part of the negative kind of downside of social media. So you may not see improved health and wellness, especially like mental wellness, from being able to try to become a hybrid athlete if what you're seeing is maybe just not achievable or attainable for you at this point in time. You maybe need to get through this marathon training cycle, run your race. Then maybe you're going to spend the next 6 to 12 months really working on building up your strength. And like I said, be that runner who reduces their volume, goes and focuses on something else for a little while, maybe with bodybuilding, maybe that'll work out for you, maybe it won't. And then you come back and do a little bit more running. Let it sort of ebb and flow versus be an all or nothing thing. So in terms of hybrid training, as I mentioned, there's sort of two different aspects to hybrid training: a hybrid workout and then like a hybrid training schedule. So a hybrid workout would combine both aspects of, say, strength and cardio, or we could talk about combining, say, two different, like, running and cycling or sport specific skills with running or something. Hybrid, you can put anything together that you want to, right? You can combine anything that you want. But, strength and cardio are probably the two ones that are most applicable to most people here. So you could combine strength and cardio in a single session. And I kind of discuss like the pros and cons of that. Like it's efficient. The workouts are really fun. Like if you've ever done anything like that before, you know that like the energy is high, like you're often in a group with other people. Sometimes it's nice to do things by time versus reps. You're doing push-ups for a minute and then squats for a minute and then running for a minute. Like you're switching it up, you're keeping it going. It can be a really great, fun style of workout. But as I mentioned, of course, the downside of that is you're not really giving either discipline 100% of your effort, because that's not the focus. And it can't be the focus, right? We can't run as fast, run as far, lift as heavy when we're juggling multiple things all within the same hour. Like we just can't. It's too much, right? So it's not a problem or a downside necessarily, just a consideration and something that you just want to keep in mind when you're thinking about what type of training do I want to do? What are my goals? What makes the most sense for me? A hybrid training schedule, like if we kind of zoom out a little bit, think about like the whole week, for example. You're going to probably have to have a few double workout days in there if we're talking about really going sort of all in terms of becoming a hybrid athlete, like really trying to give, say, both running and strength as much effort as possible, right? You're probably going to have a couple double workout days in there. Or you might say run 3 days a week and then lift 3 days a week and then have one rest day. So you might have a hybrid training schedule where you're not doing any double workout days, but you're doing maybe less of both because you need to fit it in, right? Like the math has to math. At the end of the day, we only have so many hours in a day. We only have so much time. So then if that's you, and then you start to say pick up training for a marathon, right? This is where you either add in some double workout days, right? Add in a couple of extra running days to the days that you're already doing your strength training. Or maybe you're doing double run days. That's another option. Or you're now going to reduce the frequency of the strength training so you can add in the extra running that you need to do in order to get ready for that marathon. Now, this concept, right, we can call it hybrid training, but it's also known as periodization. And periodization is where we are shifting our focus to different things to work on different goals throughout the year. But the ultimate goal is to improve our sport performance. So again, back to our marathon runner who reduces his running volume, is now doing more strength training, and then picks up his running volume for a marathon. That's a perfect example of periodization. And what happens, hopefully, if all goes to plan, this runner now is able to run a faster marathon time because he periodized his training, focused on something else that ultimately fueled an improved running capability. And so rather than being somebody who just say does all easy running 6 days a week for years and years and years on end, that's not really the best way to improve performance. The best way to improve performance is periodization. And that's what we really want. So it's just, periodization is something that I go on and on about. I talk about it all the time. It's shifting your focus a little bit to different areas of your fitness so you can more fully commit to a specific goal over the long term versus trying to juggle too many things at once, right? When we have too many balls in the air, we're going to drop them. And so rather than trying to say, I want to max out my bench press, I want to get a PR in the marathon, I want to improve my 5K time, I want to improve my body composition, I want to, rather than having all these things, enter a bodybuilding competition, I want to do 10,000 things at once with my fitness, give each goal a season of life, whether that's months, years, whatever it might be, but commit to something and then periodize around it. So it's not like I'm only, doing the same thing, working towards that goal for the entire duration if we're talking years in the making, but I'm periodizing and I'm switching things up as I go, ultimately building towards where I want to be, but let it be a long game. So overall, I think there's a lot of pros to being a hybrid athlete. I think there's a lot of good things that can come out of wanting to be a more hybrid athlete and kind of taking that focus with your training. I don't think we all need to relabel ourselves or rebrand ourselves. You're not going to see me becoming Steph, the hybrid athlete's dietitian anytime soon. I do think it's a good idea to incorporate some aspects of hybrid training and this sort of concept of being a hybrid athlete into our model as runners. But I don't think that it's necessarily the be all end all or going to be the right answer for every athlete in every scenario, right? I think that we want to take what works, but not get caught up in the comparison trap and not maybe try to set goals for ourselves that are just too out of reach for the resources and the capacity that we maybe have to put into it. So, to kind of summarize, with my advice around hybrid training, the first big thing is just like, don't hop on a bandwagon. Like, you don't need to hop on the bandwagon and try to do all the things at once, especially if you are somebody who has limited time to train. We don't want you to ultimately get kind of stalled out being a jack of all trades, but master of none. I think it's good to switch it up and definitely incorporate strength training into your routine regularly, like each and every week as a runner, but we don't need to be trying to compete in all of these different sports at a certain level because that's just probably not attainable for a lot of us. Of course, we want to include strength training and probably some other cross training into our schedule on a regular basis. But we also want to make sure that we're periodizing things so that we can really commit to whatever specific goal we're working towards and do our best in any event that we're training for, right? We don't want to show up to different events and different sports and be trying to compete and just like never being able to give things our best possible performance because we've just got too many other things on the go. And of course, we really want to avoid getting stuck in that social media trap. Seeing people who are, bigger or stronger than we are, running further, running faster, right, etc., makes us want to like set those same goals. And it's too bad because I feel like maybe this is just my social media algorithm, maybe yours is the same, but like running, especially marathon running, is just taking off in terms of popularity. And, it's hard to not get sucked in to, okay, well, I want to do these things. And of course, when you earn a medal and you show it on social media, like you get a lot of attention when you're showing off these accomplishments, even if you run and get a medal every single weekend. And so we want to avoid kind of getting sucked into that social media comparison trap and kind of getting swept up and feeling like we need to do all the things when you're setting goals for yourself. And I want you to sit down and set aside some time on a regular basis to think about your goals, set goals, but really dig into the why behind it, right? Why do I want to do this thing? Is it because I see other people doing it and I feel like I should? Is it because I really have a deep seated desire? I have a why behind it? Or is it just kind of something that I'm feeling pressured to do either by a specific person or maybe because I'm just seeing everyone else doing it and I feel like it's something that I should want for myself? When we get really clear on what we want to achieve, what we want to do, and why we want to do it for ourselves, like the why behind our goals, it is so much more powerful and so much more motivating versus setting goals just sort of for the sake of it and doing things that we don't really want to do. And I see a huge difference, like with the clients that I work with who sign up for a race because someone else told them to, someone else pressured them, someone else said, oh, I'll sign up if you sign up. Like the people who are just kind of along for the ride. If this is you as a runner and you are currently signed up for a race that you didn't really want to do, and you're having trouble being committed to your training plan or having trouble even starting a training plan because you just don't really have a strong why behind doing the race. I mean, if you're already committed, you've already signed up for the race and there's no getting out of it, try to find a why. Make it about something bigger than you. Try to see if you can sort of shift that narrative a little bit to get that deeper understanding. And if you can't, then like, that's okay. Like the next time you can just say, no, it's just not for me. I don't want to do it. No, thank you. Until you have that strong why, that is really what's kind of the key behind motivation and the key behind achieving our goals. So do I want you to be a hybrid athlete? Yes, I do. Despite some of the downsides, some of the kind of drawbacks that I talked about, we have to be careful around not overextending ourselves, not overtraining, not winding up underfueled, right? That's a huge risk when we're adding in a lot of double workout days, a lot of volume without adequate recovery time. We also, of course, risk getting burnt out and not ultimately reaching the goals we want to. While there are a lot of downsides to going like all in and just going super hard with being a hybrid athlete, I think there's a lot of pieces of hybridization with our training that is good and we should do. So I want you to be a hybrid athlete. I just don't want you to drive yourself totally crazy over it and do a disservice to your mental health and physical performance. But more so than just being a hybrid athlete, what I really want you to do is set goals for yourself that are meaningful for you. Focus in on setting those goals that are important to you, meaningful for you, have a very strong and clear why behind them so that you can build towards those goals consistently over months, years, etc., without burnout, without needing to quit your job to train full time, without falling off and being sort of very wishy-washy with your commitment and your consistency. Because at the end of the day, that is going to get you further in your fitness journey than just maybe kind of grabbing onto every new trend that happens to be out there. Because there's a lot of them, right? Time moves quick in social media world. There's always a new trend, always something. Every couple months we're seeing that wave of something new coming through. So, take what you need from hybrid training, leave what you don't, and just make sure that whatever it is that you're working towards is really meaningful and important for you. So if you need help with working towards your goals this year as a runner, as a triathlete, as maybe a hybrid athlete, if that's what you really identify with and want to call yourself now after listening to this episode, then, I would certainly love to help you. I offer, of course, both nutrition coaching as well as run coaching in a one-on-one basis or in my online program, my signature online program. It's called the Fuel Train Recover Club. So if you're looking for some help with a fueling plan, you're looking for help with your training, you want to understand, how to eat to reach your goals, you want someone to help coach you towards your next marathon, whatever it is that you need, I would love to be your guide and be your partner on this journey. So you can find out more details about all of the different services that I offer at the link in the show notes. And of course, if you have any questions, then I am just an email away. You can get all of that in the show notes as well from my website. I want to thank you so much for listening to today's episode. I really hope that you found it helpful as much as I enjoyed putting it together for you and learning everything that I could about being a hybrid athlete. That is it for today's episode, and we will see you right back here next week. Bye for now. The information on this podcast is for educational purposes only and is not to be used or relied upon for diagnosis or treatment of any health condition. This information does not create a client-practitioner relationship and should not be used as a substitute for professional medical advice.